In the black veins of the southern wilderness, there are sounds that do not belong to animals. Wind that carries breath, steps that do not sink, eyes that glint not with reflection, but hunger. Tonight, we open what the forestry rangers called Incident Folder 72C, better known as the Skunk Ape encroachments. Imagine the heat, thick enough to slow a heartbeat. The smell, sweet rot mixed with wet fur. The silence between frogs before a scream that never reaches the sky. You may not know of the skunk ape beyond the dripping headlines of old tabloid ink. Ape Man, swamp phantom, forgotten cousin beneath the canopy. Yet to those who've stood before it, its presence was not folklore, it was confession. Something looking back from the tree line, taller than the dark itself. Before we begin, we invite you to let your senses slow. Breathe damp air. Hear mosquitoes trace circles in the dark. What follows is reconstruction, each word recovered from interviews, incident reports, and final transmissions. Before we unseal File 72C in full, preserve your place in the archives. Subscribe, not to a channel, but to continuity. Now, turn down every light but one. My face-to-face encounter with a skunk ape. Story 1. The first encounter. It began just as the sun dipped behind the gray fingers of the cypress canopy. An ordinary evening for Jesse, a timber scout familiar with the southern swamps. He was alone, his boots sinking softly into the mud, the smell of wet earth thick in his nostrils. The air was cotton-heavy, sticky with hidden rain. The hum of insects droned, a lullaby for the swamp's darker tenants. Jesse had been tracking the echoes of heavy footsteps, unsure if they were bear or something else. He traced a path through the underbrush where the moss hung like wet curtains, brushing his shoulder. The light began to flicker, a single, faint glow in the distance, fluttering like a lost firefly caught in the gloom. The warmth on his skin peeled away as a cold prickle ran down his spine. The night fell quieter, intense in its stillness. And then, there, two eyes, low and wide-set, reflected the weak firelight with an unnatural gleam. A breath more pungent than rot, tinged with skunk musk, curled through his senses. Jesse froze. His heartbeat thudded deafening in his ears, nearly drowning out the sound that emerged. Deep, guttural, something between growl and lament. The figure stepped out from behind a twisted tree, taller than any man, cloaked in matted hair slick with swamp dew. Its gaze held something ancient and calculating, not beast, but remnant. Jesse tried to move, but the swamp had claimed him, root and mud as binding chains. The creature came closer, letting loose a low, mournful howl, a sound that felt like history mourning itself. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the skunk ape vanished into the smoke of heat and shadow, leaving behind the echo of wet, fur-brushing leaves, and a man forever changed. The file states Jesse's last words before silence overwhelmed the tape. It knows the secrets I don't want to learn. Story 2. The Ranger's Vigil. The record of Ranger Elise Moreno, whose testimony remains sealed beneath 8 layers of declassification. Her log begins in the dead hours, at the threshold where exhaustion blurs into hallucination and reality breathes heavier. The station lantern flickers, painting her hands gold as she writes. The world beyond the window is rain-mottled, moonlight splintered across tangled brambles. She describes the night as too quiet, rain swallowing every distant owl, every coyote howl. The air is thick enough to drink, and the only smell sharper than damp wood is the sour trace of decay coming through the cracks in the window pane. Elise recalls watching the line where the forest meets the swamp, a border that is supposed to keep the wild things away from the houses. The perimeter alarm is silent, but there's a tension to the darkness, a weight she feels in her chest that grows heavier with every passing minute. Her flashlight beam cuts across the dripping black, illuminating nothing but twisted root and glistening leaves. At 2:16 a.m., she hears the first sign, muddy, deliberate footfalls just beyond the porch. She leans forward, breath shallow, feeling every vibration through her boots. She reports a smell like burnt flesh laced with musk wafting in, threading its way into her lungs. She lifts the lantern, sweeping the gloom. A shape moves at the edge of her vision, a tall, hunched silhouette swaying between the trees, impossibly broad, its hair streaming wet in thick ropes. Elisa's pulse thrums in her ears. The world seems narrowed, bordered by the ring of lantern light and fear. The creature stands motionless, almost reverent, eyes glinting from the darkness with a flat, animal intelligence. Every sound is magnified. The steady rain, her heartbeat, and the low, rumbling growl that rises up like thunder trapped underground. Elisa's notes say the air grew frigid, her hands numb despite the humid night. She was certain it was watching her, judging not just her presence, but her intent. The encounter stretches in slow motion, moments measured by each trembling breath, each silent wish for dawn. The creature's arm reaches out, grotesquely long, gripping a boundary post so hard she could hear the splinter of wood. It leans forward, sniffs, then releases a roar so soft it feels like an earthquake underfoot. In that instant, Elise records seeing faces in the beast's fur, ghostly reflections, echo images that shimmer like mirages across its hide. Were these the souls of the vanished, or merely the swamp's tricks of moon and madness? The beast vanishes into the downpour, leaving only shattered wood and a lingering sense of unblinking scrutiny. Her log ends not with relief, but with warning. It knows when you're alone, and it waits for the rain, because that's when the earth remembers its legends most. Story 3. The Archivist's Recovered Cassette. We present the third testimony, culled from a recovered field cassette mailed anonymously to our vault in 1997. The tape is warped, static-drenched, but the voice it preserves, the trembling confession of a biologist named Dr. Christopher Lane, cuts through the years as if it were thumping in the next room. Dr. Lane's narration opens in the cracked hush before dawn, somewhere deep within the Everglades. His voice is measured, clinical, but each syllable trembles with an undercurrent of disbelief. His purpose was routine, a survey of marsh flora and microclimates, a night spent gathering specimen electspools from knee-deep in creek mud. But as the tape rolls, his breathing quickens, his words slow, as if reluctant to wake the memory itself. The swampland around him was alive, branches clawing the air, frogs croaking in frenzied chorus, a perpetual buzz against his skin. The temperature dripped from his hair, his clothes sodden. The world tasted metallic, coppery heat, hints of blood and rotting foliage. He describes approaching a cypress dome where the water pooled black and deep, roots curling like the bones of drowned giants. Suddenly, the chorus of frogs faltered, replaced by violent silence. Lane's flashlight, flickering with dying batteries, caught only shards of movement, something massive but stealthy, like muscle gliding beneath murky water. He knelt, gripped by a sensation he could only describe as the air hardening around me, like a glove closing over my skull. There was the stench again, unmistakable, choking, familiar and alien, rancid musk, decomposing leather. He turns, shining his beam into the tangle, and finds a pair of reflective eyes at waist height, then rising to meet his own. The skunk ape stood there, monstrous, but primordial, posture half-slumped, limbs corded with sinew, fur slick and streaked with mud. Its face was wrong, broad, sagging, lips wet and lopsided, but the gaze was chillingly aware. Lane compared it to a priest in mourning, a thing that remembers every dead thing that ever touched this swamp. He whispers into the recorder, describing every tremor in his body, goosebumps pebbling along his arms, fingers numb, jaw clenched so tight he thought he might faint. As the creature steps forward, Lane is struck by such intense dread that his senses blur around the edges. He tries to back away, his boots caught in tangled roots. Then, the skunk ape lifts its arm, revealing a scrap of fabric tangled in its fingers, already soaked in black water. The moment stretches, Lane's breath held, heart thrumming out staccato warnings. The beast drops the fabric at his feet, then leans so close that Lane swears he felt its breath in his ear, a whisper that was not language, but memory calling itself home. It vanishes with one bound, water churning in its wake. Lane speaks to the tape, his voice a rasp. "It didn't come for me. It came to return something that was lost. I think it remembers everyone who ever vanished here." Story 4. The Nurse's Dusk Crossing. From the archives, we now retrieve the fourth record, a transcript recovered from an unnamed nurse's voicemail, sent in trembling urgency near midnight. It is a confession of exhaustion and fear, a crossing over the border between ordinary routine and inherited nightmare. The nurse's shift had bled into dusk. The hospital parking lot was an island carved from swamp, surrounded by murky water and knotted underbrush. She lingers in the staff hut by the rear exit, reorganizing pills by flashlight, waiting for the rain to ease. A dying bulb buzzes overhead, insects suiciding themselves in spirals. Outside, night creeps in, a wall of stagnant air, pressure shifting, a sense that the landscape itself is bracing for something to pass over. The nurse notices the silence first. Emergency generators hum, but every natural sound, crickets, frogs, birds, recedes until her own breathing is the only rhythm left. The nurse steps outside, greeted by the smell, a blend of wet moss, standing water, and a bitter animal musk. She walks beneath the tall, hissing sodium floodlights, feeling their heat on her scalp, but never warming the skin beneath her scrubs. Her car is parked at the edge of the lot, its windows dark, the puddled pavement an oil-slick mirror. It begins with a low thunk, a trash bin tipped over in the shadows. She pauses, clutching her keys, heart a tight drum in her throat. Something moves quickly at the very edge of light. Massive, deliberate, not shying from her gaze, but circling behind her peripheral vision. She senses the shift in wind, a gust suffused with that Alex wild musk, so thick she almost chokes. The figure emerges, a bulk rising from the tangled reeds, wet fur glistening like the hide of a moldy bear. Not quite ape, not all animal. Its fingers curl around the concrete lot's border, nails scraping, leaving shallow furrows in the mossy cement. The nurse's body floods with electric terror, limbs tingling, scalp prickling, the world narrowing. She tries to retreat, but her feet are rooted. The skunk ape stands between her and the hospital's warm, lit sanctuary. Eyes darker than the swamp pool's slice through the sallow fluorescence. She remembers seeing its chest rise and fall, the silhouette of something slung over one shoulder. A deer, perhaps, or the limp bulk of a lost pet. The mouth parts in a soundless howl, the animal caught somewhere between mourning and warning. In her voice memo, the nurse confesses she felt as if she de-aged years in seconds, a sense that the beast had watched her for a lifetime before revealing itself. Its presence was not an accident, but a ritual. It slowly turns and drags its burden away, vanishing through a break in the wall of fog. The only evidence of its passing, the scent hanging in the humid air, and a single handprint, larger than any man's, left in the dust of her windshield. Her last words, frantic and disbelieving. Someone needs to warn the others. There's more than one. Watching, waiting. They walk where we park our cars, and they know where the doors are kept unlocked. Story 5. The Testimony of Clara Finch. It is the testimony of Clara Finch, a wildlife photographer whose account is fragmented, written on the backs of half-developed prints, smudges of swamp water, and film chemicals intermingling. Clara's story unfolds in a sequence of light and shadow, her camera capturing the world as streaks, shapes, and myth. She describes a midnight expedition, canoe gliding silently over glass water, moon slicing the clouds, fog clinging to the shallows. She documents a tension that thickens with every stroke, her solitude disrupted only by the symphony of frogs and the heartbeat of her own anticipation. The air, dense and metallic, tastes like old keys and gunpowder, a whisper of lightning far off. Her shots begin mundane, egret in silhouette, reflections warped by ripples. Then, frame by frame, something shifts. The foliage grows heavier, the fog more insistent. Her journal notes the moment she feels observed, the world seeming to contract around her field of vision, everything too quiet. Even the wind falls still. Suddenly, her canoe lists in a current that shouldn't exist, drifting to the shadowed banks where ancient cypress roots claw the air. Clara steadies herself, flashes her lamp, catching, for one silent instant, a shape crouched at the water's edge. It stands, slow as a dream, towering, hunched, covered in a slick tapestry of fur and swamp debris. The skunk ape turns before her lens, one arm resting among the pale tangles of hanging moss. Its face, half luminous in the lamp's beam, is a map of scars and sorrow, eyes weary with eons, mouth slack yet defiant. Clara is paralyzed, her throat tight with soundless warning. The animal's gaze is not hostile, but knowing, as if it recognizes her attempt to record a moment that cannot exist outside legends. She lifts her camera, hands shaking, images blurring, and captures a single, impossible photograph before the skunk ape lifts its head, sniffing the air. Clara glimpses its mouth moving, something like words garbled in the fog. She writes, "It was speaking to the marsh, not to me." But the message felt meant for every trespasser who leaves footprints on these vanished trails. Without warning, the creature submerges itself in the water, dark silhouette vanishing in a flurry of ripples. No splash, just silence reclaiming its territory and the mark of something ancient lingering in the mist. Clara's report closes with her last transmission to the Night Howl archives, voice quiet but unbroken. Whatever we seek in the night, it exists already. The skunk ape is the memory we leave behind. Every fear that walked these swamps before we dared to look. Her image was lost, camera seized, negatives corrupted, memory sealed as protocol demands. 5 voices, braided by fear, endurance, and ancient memory. The skunk ape lingers not in rumor, but in the marrow of every place shadow clings fiercest. Tonight, you have walked the damp corridors of history, places that pulse just beneath the surface, guarded by more than flesh. The story's refuse tidy endings. Truth in the nocturnal world is never written in ink, but leaves its evidence as scars, on skin, on memory, in the swamps that breed nightmares. These files, now sealed under protocol, do not exist outside this vault. Yet their echoes seep through the candlelight, cataloged in dust, humidity, and hush. If you have encountered something beyond the light, record it. Every truth joins another in the vault. Submit your account, preserve your place, and let the forbidden history bleed into the next reel.